Hello there. We are in the book Nook. I'm Sin, and today we are doing my August wrap up, which means fall is quickly approaching and will be here at any moment. I feel like I read a really good variety of books this month. I read everything from horror to cozy murder mysteries to nonfiction, cosmic horror, vampire books. Well, the vampire book was also a horror romance, books about food, and fantasy as well. So let's get to it. The first thing I read was A Short Walk Through a Wide World by Douglas Westerbeek. And it follows this main character who, when she is younger, she finds this weird, like, puzzle ball, and it becomes one of her most prized possessions. And at some point, her and her two other sisters go to this strange little wishing well that has, like, a face on it, and it's really weird. And they're gonna throw down there and, like, give away their most prized possessions in the hope to, like, help others and whatnot. And so her sisters throw in their items. The one sister threw in, like, a gold chain, the other one threw in her favorite doll, and then she was supposed to throw in her puzzle ball, but she didn't. And after this, very shortly, she gets a very strange illness where if she stays in one place, this happens when she's 9 years old too, that she just starts bleeding out of all of her orifices and her bones start breaking and cracking and she can't stand still. But as soon as she moves on to another place, she's fine for a few days. Never seems to be more than 2 or 3 days, sometimes 4 if she's lucky. And so this sets off her trajectory of going all around the world and traveling to all these places in different spaces, trying to outrun this illness and also trying to see if there is a cure for it. It was a really great book. I really enjoyed it. It was very strange and it was very interesting to see how it all worked out in the end. So after that, I read The Blue Maiden by Anna Noyes. This book was weird. I thought it was okay. It was like this hazy fever dream of a book where stuff was just cloudy around the edges. There was like a storyline, but also the storyline just kind of drifted and floated along. It was cohesive and not cohesive. I don't know how to. It was like a dream. When you have a dream and things make sense, but they don't make sense at the same time. It follows the story of these two sisters who grew up on this island where there was a history of prior witches being burned. They almost seem kind of witchy themselves, and their father was a pastor slash preacher guy, and I don't even really know because it was really weird and I thought it was okay. After that, I read my favorite book of the month, hands down, because, and I'll tell you why, Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. Holy crap, this book was amazing. It was so good that after that, I DNF'd 3 books because this book was so good. Everything I read, I was like, nothing's comparing, nothing's grabbing me right away, nothing's as magical. And this happens every time I read a Brandon Sanderson book. He like ruins me for other books for like a week or two. Cause like everything I read, I don't know if I'm just like, I'm not trying to compare it to his writing, but so much just falls short. So anyways, the Sunlit Man, right? It follows the story of Nomad. He flashes onto this planet because he kind of like jumps and time skips. He has these different augments to him where he has, they're like enhancements, I guess you could say. And he also has something called a torment. And his torment is that he can't hurt people, at least not intentionally. But he's running currently from, oh, I forget what they're called. They're like the Midnight Society. I don't think that's what they're called. The Night something. So there's these people after him because at one point in time, he had a weapon that was called the Dawn Shard that was like a god killer. He no longer has it, but if they catch him, they can find out where it is and they want to get a hold of it, and that would be bad. So they've been chasing him. And he ends up on this planet. It's called Canticle. The sun on this planet is like murderous. If you end up in the sun, you're just basically incinerated. And so the people that actually live on this planet, because people actually live here, are literally mobile and outrunning the sun every day. He ends up, and there's kind of like a war going on. There's this guy called the Cinder King, and he's basically trying to like murder all the other like more peaceful factions. And he is a greedy, horrible person. But when Nomad gets there, you know, he's not really there to take sides. And then it's a matter of like, who is he gonna try to form an alliance with? Will he actually, you know, be a decent person, or is he gonna just go to the Cinder King because maybe they can help him charge up his stuff so he can jump and get off this planet. So you have to see where the story goes. And it's super good and I loved it. It was amazing. Would highly recommend it. So after that, I read a short little novella about a magical place called Garbage Town. And it's called The Past is Red by Catherine M. Valente. Their saint of Garbage Town is Oscar, like Oscar the Grouch, because, you know, he lived in a garbage can. These people basically live on Garbage Island, like this floating island of garbage that is in the sea because the people before them destroyed the world and the planet, and all that's left is like either people on random boats or barges or garbage islands. And so this is how they survive. And it follows the story of this girl who is the most hated girl in Garbage Town. And she's hated because of something she did, which would be a super spoiler if I tell you. So I'm not going to get into all that. It's very sweet and heartfelt, and it's a beautiful little book. And I was surprised by how much I loved it. Now, if you do want the spoilers and kind of where the story goes, I do have a standalone review for that, which I will link down below in the description if you want to check that out. So after the book about Garbage Town, I read The Morningside by Taya Obret. It seems like a post-apocalyptic kind of book. This mom and her daughter move into this building called the Morningside, and they move in with her aunt. The daughter, like her mom, never really shares her life with her, like stuff about when she was a kid or when she was growing up and all that stuff. She's very like silent about it and doesn't want to open up or like share things. And I guess there was a war that happened, and she's afraid that if like her daughter does anything with the wrong people, they'll be in trouble and all that. So it makes sense, but she doesn't really explain this to her daughter. And you know, maybe if she did, her daughter wouldn't have felt so like closed out from her. So when she was with the aunt starts telling her all kinds of stuff about them growing up and this farm that they used to live on and their relatives. And she's like, what the heck? My mom never told me any of this stuff. And they're living in this building too. And they kind of do like, her aunt kind of did like the maintenance and stuff for the building. So they help out from here to there. And the daughter, one day she's in one of the apartments and she sees this lady who lives in the penthouse. Her name is Bezzy Derez. She is super rich and she has these 3 dogs that she only walks at night. And she sees her up in her penthouse and she's changing. And what she sees is that she sees this woman has these scars all over her chest and her body. And so one day she's talking to her aunt. She's telling her, she's like, I discovered something about Bezzy Derez. And then somehow the conversation evolves into the dogs that Bezzy has are men. During the day, they're men. And at night, they're dogs. She wonders if there's actually this like world underneath the world, you know, kind of like the Matrix or something. And so the whole book, you're kind of wondering, is this a thing or no? Is it just her aunt was being fanciful because she was like 11? I think that was the age of the girl, somewhere around there. At first, because I did read this book shortly after Brandon Sanderson's book, I had to sit with it for a few days to decide if I liked it. It was strange and it was very, I don't know, like, you know, you're trying to figure out if maybe some of the stuff that seems so fantastical really is true. And it ended up like being a pretty great book. After that, I read a really cute book called The Kagawa Food Detectives. That's by Hasashi Kashiwai. And it is the story of this place called the Kagawa Diner. And it's run by this father and his daughter. And what they do is if you come in, if you can find them, because there's like an ad in the one magazine, it's like Gourmet Monthly, I believe. And it's very mysterious, doesn't really tell you where it's at. But if you can track them down, and if you go to them with a certain dish you want made, and it doesn't matter like if it's Japanese, Chinese, Italian, American, any kind of cuisine from any type of culture, they will try to track that down and make it for you. And part of it is like reliving a memory. There's usually a memory attached to this food that's something very meaningful to the people, like a former love or someone who passed away and all that. And it's just very sweet and cute book. There's a cat in it, so that made me like it more. But yeah, there's like different dishes, like even like beef stew, and there's a whole story attached to it, how this one woman had met this guy when she was in college and they ended up talking, and then he asked her out on a date and they went on a date and they were eating beef stew. And the first time the meeting, he proposed marriage to her and she freaked out and ran away. But she wanted to have that beef stew again that she'd had when that had happened, like because there's such a connection of emotion to that. So I love books that have to do with food and stuff like that, and it was just cute and cozy. After that, I read The Lady from the Black Lagoon by Mallory O'Meara. This is a nonfiction book, and it's about Millicent Patrick, who designed the creature from the Black Lagoon, which is one of the most iconic monsters in horror movie history, and how there was this skeevy little man who was jealous and decided that he deserved all the credit for it when he didn't even create it at all, and how she was kind of pushed out the door because back in the early 1900s, things weren't so great for women. It digs into her story and like what she did, what her career was. And as Mallory O'Meara like got into this, because she also, the author, works in horror movies and is a producer herself, and it's still the film industry is still very heavily male dominated. So seeing someone like Millicent back in the day working in this industry was very inspiring to her. So she wanted to tell the story of her life. And as she got more into it, she discovered, Millicent worked for Disney and drew for Disney, and she worked on the Chernabog sequence in Fantasia, the Night on Bald Mountain, which is like the most scary part of it. So, like that connection to monsters, like even way back then. And then she also worked on Dumbo as well, and she was a model, and she also was in several different movies and TV shows and all that stuff. And she had a pretty fantastic life, and she was like an ethereal beauty as well. It's a fantastic book. It's a beautiful look into this woman's life. I would highly recommend it. If you have any interest in women and horror, or even just like in classic horror movies in general, The Lady from the Black Lagoon is absolutely excellent. Okay, and then I read a very cute, cozy murder mystery called No Paula to Stand On. And it is part of a series called the Bookmobile Cat Mysteries. And there's a cat in it who the main character talks to, and kind of like when she's trying to figure out the murder mystery, she always runs stuff by the cat, and he's like, meow, like the cat might know something, or be able to help figure out the mystery. And in this book, he is actually helpful. So heck yeah. There's this woman in this small town in Michigan, and she has a restaurant. It's called like the Three Seasons restaurant, super fancy. And they had these ice cream cones they were making, and they were supposed to be gluten-free. But somehow someone snuck into her place of business and put this weird chemical in the cones that made them not gluten-free, and it ended up sending like 8 people to the hospital, or 2 of them were in like critical condition, and then the other ones were very, very ill. I don't think the other ones went to the hospital. 2 might have only went to the hospital, but anyways, it made people really ill. And then all of a sudden, all the restaurants in town are getting review bombed, and then the library is experiencing vandalism and all this stuff. So it's like a bunch of stuff's going on. And the main character of the story takes it upon herself that she needs to figure this out, because the person who owns the restaurant is like her best friend ever. So she wants to help her, and she wants to solve this mystery. And it was cute and cozy and fun, and I really loved it. And I would definitely read more of these Bookmobile Cat Mysteries. They're adorable. I love it, especially this time of year as we're getting closer to fall. Give me them cozy murder mysteries. Okay, so after that, I read The Deep by Nick Cutter, which is a cosmic horror, and it takes place underwater. And if you've been around the channel, you know that I love underwater horror. I absolutely love it. This one is so flippin' weird and creepy, and just, it's got those kind of little bit of H.P. Lovecraft vibes going on. So the premise of the story is there is this pandemic, I guess, and it's people getting what they call the gets. And the gets is people just start forgetting things. First, it's small stuff like why they walked into a room. Then they start forgetting birthdays and anniversaries. Then they forget the person's name. Then they forget how to live. Like they'll just keep walking into a wall over and over. And then they'll forget how to breathe. And then their body just shuts down and they die. And in the meantime, all these horrible, gross, pustulent sores break out all over their bodies. So that's happening. Well, there's these 2 brothers. One of them is down in the Mariana Trench doing this research on the stuff they discovered called ambrosia. And this ambrosia might just be the cure to this thing called the gets. The one brother is just super smart, not very good with people, but he has a genius brain. So he's been doing different tests and stuff with this ambrosia, and it seems like it cures all kinds of stuff like cancer and possibly this disease called the gets. But one issue with it seems to be that, yeah, the diseases get cured, but the things or living beings that intake this stuff become insanely angry and start attacking everything. So That's not so good. So the brother, I guess, is trying to see if he can somehow neutralize that anger part of it. I don't know. But anyways, what happens is there is like a whole military installment, like floating base above the water, above the base that's way down under the ground, which is, or in the Mariana Trench called the Trieste. That's under the water. And then up above is the military installation. Okay, so they lose all communication with them. And at some point, they receive a transmission that's like the one scientist brother who's like calling for his brother. And so they call the brother in to see if they can probably take him down there with one of their people on a sub so that he can kind of find out what's going on and whatnot, because the scientists don't seem to want to talk to the people up above them or whatever. So he goes there. And when he gets there, and his brother finally lets them in, he's like, I didn't call for you. Why would I want you here? Which has basically been like their whole relationship. And then stuff gets really effed up and weird. And it was awesome. Great book. If you like weird underwater horror that takes strange psychological twists and turns where you don't know what's real or not, The Deep by Nick Cutter. Would highly recommend. All right, so after that, I read The Girl Who Chased the Moon by Sarah Addison Allen. It's a cozy, magical book, and it's about this girl who, her mother passes away, and when she does, she ends up going to live with this grandfather that she didn't know existed because her mom really never told her about her life when she was younger or about any of her family or anything. And her mom was super big on like philanthropy and helping other people. Her mom even started a school for girls to like help empower them and did all these really wonderful things. So when she goes back to this town where her mom grew up, she starts to find out that her mom growing up was like this horrible, spoiled a-hole. Now she doesn't believe it because all she ever saw was the good that her mom did. But she kind of has to like come to terms with this. And her mom did something very horrible that the town hated her for. And so they're treating the daughter very weird. And she slowly kind of finds out what happened. And so the whole story is to see like if there can be some healing there from what had happened and all of that stuff. And it was super magical and sweet and cute. And I really loved it. I am really enjoying that author quite a bit. I will probably try to make my way through all of her books at some point in time. All right. So after that, So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. This book comes out on September 10th, and it is a vampire book. It is heartfelt, emotional. It's about breaking out of relationships that maybe you're stuck in that you should have left a long time ago, and not being able to truly shine as yourself. It's also a horror romance story, and there's vampires, and it's awesome, and I love Rachel Harrison. And if you like Rachel Harrison, go get this book as soon as it comes out. It's awesome. I loved it. And there will be a standalone review coming for this soon, so keep an eye out for that. After that, I read the book called The Horse by Willie Vlautin. And this book follows the story of this guy, Al Ward, who was a songwriter, and he was actually quite good. He doubted himself, but he had a pretty cool career over the years. I mean, yeah, he played in mainly like casinos and in a bunch of different bands, but he did play in one band that was really going places. But as with stories such as this, he had a major player in his life that was a big problem, and that was alcohol. And so you see alcohol rear its ugly head time and again, which kind of like ruins his trajectory in some of these bands where, you know, he's just getting wasted and he F's up and so gets kicked out of them. And then when he's actually doing well, other people in these other bands he's in are, you know, abusing substances and doing stuff that's going to probably like ruin their career. So he tries to, you know, be there for them and all of that. And at some point, he's older and he's in his 60s now. He takes himself kind of out of the equation where he's away from everything because he grew up in Nevada, so the land of debauchery, you know, gambling, girls, music, rock and roll, all that stuff. And so he goes and moves out to this remote property that's on like a mining claim that used to be, I think it was his uncle's or something like that. And so he lives in super isolation. His nearest neighbor is like 30 miles away. But at this point in time, he's not drinking anymore. He still plays his guitar and like writes some songs here and there, but you get like these flashbacks of his life. It's sad and it's sweet. And at some point, now he has his daily routine of what he does. He goes outside one day and there's this horse there, and the horse is blind. And he's not sure if the horse is actually there and if he's finally just going crazy. But what ends up happening is this horse kind of gives them a purpose in life again. What happens thereafter, it's like a chance at redemption. So it's a really great short novella. You know, if you like stories about ups and downs of musicians and struggles with addiction, The Horse by Willie Vlautin might just be for you. I had a very interesting reading month. I read some really good ones, I had some okay ones, and I had some shining gems of books. Now, out of all of these, obviously my number one favorite was Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. But the next one is, honestly, that I loved so much was So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. It's so good. She's so good. Like, what an awesome author. I like to claim that I don't like romance, but those horror romances I love. Give me them. If you like videos where I talk about multiple things that I have read or am reading, the next video coming up will be about that. So stick around, check it out. And if you enjoyed hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.